of Racing UK magazine's British Touring Car Championship Season Review.
Well, that was a year, wasn't it? You have to say a huge congratulations to the new champ, Tom Ingram. It was a hugely well-deserved result in the end. I know there are people who take the stance of it's his turn. He's worked hard over the years, but it doesn't work like that, does it? I mean, you don't get trophies for coming back year on year. They get picked up because of the job that was done properly. In our season preview at Motor Racing UK magazine, we stated that if Tingram didn't come into the final weekend of the season in contention for the title, then 2022 would have been a disaster for both him and the team. As we know, he landed at Brands as a chaser, albeit one who was close to the championship leader, and he delivered a perfect weekend. Dominant in qualifying, outstandingly inch perfect in the first two races before finding himself in some interesting positions in the third race, the title clincher. He kind of muddled his way through muddy waters there and kept us cool on what could have been an explosive race to take a title that he deserved. Not through years of service, but by delivering everything that is needed in the BTCC campaign. He was only just ahead of some truly hard-hitting competition. In this review, we're going to have a bit of a look at things team by team, but before that, you couldn't really look at the British Touring Car Championship in 2022 without taking a moment out to consider one huge change to the series this year. The biggest technical shift since either the next generation touring car regulations were introduced just over a decade ago, or even the switch to RML components, and that change has been hybrid. The system's brought about some, let's just say, varied opinions, not just from the fans. Some drivers and teams have been more vocal than others. Perhaps that's been driven by their own experiences with the setup when it comes to reliability, but perception is an important facet here. Has there been less overtaking than during the ballast era? Has the tension during battles on track been more or less? Has that reliability, or lack thereof on occasion, had a greater effect? Frankly, it's not just as simple as saying yes or no to any of those points. This year, I've spoken to drivers who were more than biffed that in a session or race theirs just didn't work. I've had mechanics from a couple of teams tell me that it's not all it's cracked up to be, if I want to be polite about it. And some believe their season was hampered by the late delivery of kit. I've seen an entire team chastised and told not to talk negatively in public about hybrid. The statistics show, though, that in some races the overtaking has dropped, but in others it actually went up. In the first half of the season as well, the gaps between the cars that were running in the top 10 were actually reduced and the pack closed up. The inevitability of some drivers slicing through the field because of different weights in the ballast era have now gone, but there still have been some dominant drives where it's taken a little more driver skill to achieve the same result. Many of the drivers I've spoken with are positive about hybrid. They've all had problems. At one point, a team, who I won't name here, were not happy. They told me that across the weekend that one of their cars had working hybrid for one of the three races and the others in the squad had none at all for all three races. A fair number of drivers have relished the strategic challenges. On the surface that sounds negative in a Formula 1 kind of way, but it hasn't always necessarily meant that it has created boring racing through every round. Over the first few rounds of the season, overtaking was actually up in the top 10 overall, comparing 2021 to 2022, where 4 of the first 5 rounds were held in similar conditions. Brands was damp this year, so taking that round away left only Croft with a lower amount. We witnessed a higher number of overtaking moves within the top 10 at Donington, Oulton and Thruxton, with the Hampshire circuit then seeming to set a trend. Josh Cook won the first 2 races, and 5 times in 2022 race 1 and race 2 were won by the same driver. The internet was awash with claims that hybrid was having a negative impact in that way. That kind of single weekend dominance is a recent trend, but it can't be blamed entirely on the change of regulations away from ballast. A driver winning the opening 2 races of a weekend only happened once in each of the 2016 and 17 seasons. It happened twice in 2018. As for the 3 seasons prior to hybrid arriving, it became something that happened roughly half the time. 5 out of 10 rounds in 2019, 4 out of 9 rounds in the COVID-shortened 2020 season, and 4 times last year. It's a nice narrative, but it doesn't quite wash when you add all of those stats together. Like ballast, hybrid is a work in progress. The perfect recipe is yet to be concocted. The balance of power output and time, or laps left, or laps bereft, with the extra oomph is yet to be perfected, but it is in the ballpark. Don't worry, I'm almost finished on the hybrid angle, because let us be honest here, it is not being reliable or user-friendly enough in an environment where it will be battered 3 times on race day. Clearly, the testing run over the year or so before 2022 was well run, and the restricted inclusion of Andrew Jordan running at Silverstone in 2021 in a hybrid car gave the green light. But I think it's safe to say that in a championship like this, where there is contact, where you're not going to try to demolish curbs until the red mist descends when it's time to attack the track, or your rivals in anger, then you won't know. But for 2023, it has to be better. The season did not see any new models introduced. It did see newly constructed individual chassis hit the track. It also saw some new engines arrive. The Toker engine moved from being Swindon built to being manufactured by M Sport. Swindon didn't disappear, however. Oh no. The 4-car Accel8 Hyundai team rocked up in 2022 with a Hyundai Swindon power plant, and it turned out to be a bit of a sweetie. So I guess we were going team by team. Why not start with the outfit that gave us the 2022 British Touring Car Champion?
So what we're going to do is give you a roundup, driver by driver, throughout the season.
Now consider this for a moment. Accel8 landed in the championship in 2019 as an outfit with a rich history from running minis. They made a huge stride for each season in a carefree, planned and controlled way. The days of let's give BTCC a shot are long gone now, and theirs has been an exceptionally well orchestrated rise like this. 2019 ended with 2 rather old and well used MGs. 2020 blindside people a little by developing a new car and grabbing podiums with both examples of their Hyundai i30. 2021 doubled up to run 4 cars and bringing the title contender Tom Ingram, who brings the maiden victory for the outfit. 2022 bringing a new Hyundai engine, win almost a third of the races in the year to take the driver's crown. There was no winging it in 2022, it was the result of good old hard work and delivering what the package had the potential to give. From the opening lap of the year of race 1, it was fight, fight, fight with an eye on the crown for Ingram. Inside of Ash Sutton at Coppice, first time around at Donington, was a signal of intent. The aggression was there, as was the thought processes to capitalise on others opening doors. Jake Hill, Colin Turkington going toe-to-toe on the second lap of the season gave Ingram a chance to take both of them on lap 2. He grabbed that opportunity and cemented his first success of 2022. It wasn't, however, going to be a runaway year. The combo didn't steamroll the opposition. Donington did put a mindset on things, but it took a little while to add to that victory, which meant, in the words of Tinkerman himself, that things would have to be pointsy. Brands on the Indy layout was just that. Racking up the totals just behind the leaders. Thruxton didn't start well, but mitigating for a couple of top 10s kept a foot in. In the middle of the craziness of race day, the head was kept level. Things really did take a turn at Oulton though. 2 wins really did raise the banner, proclaiming that the challenge was on. Perhaps that was the linchpin moment. Proof and justification. In relative terms, it was a calm summer. Considered drives at Croft, including an intriguing tactical battle with teammate Dan Lloyd, were supplanted with making the best of things in Scotland and 3 third places at Snedden. Then came Thruxton again. Tom Ingram really has come into his own since moving to Accel8. Yes, he's always been reasoned, entertaining and open with things, but in 2021 the public-facing Ingram just seemed to become more at home with himself than ever. And, again from the outside, it seemed to lay a foundation that buried almost doubts from the inside. The second meeting at the Hampshire Speed Bowl exposed the Hyundai once again as a car that simply isn't there yet at this track. It was a podium in murky conditions last term, but getting the head down and making the most of it was the thing to do. At Silverstone towards the end of the year, it wasn't a great Saturday, but Sunday collected points for the Hall in race 1 and 2 with a well-taken, race 3 win to set him up for third in the championship finale. He came into Brands 7 points adrift. I predicted if it was a clean weekend, he'd be hard to top. It wasn't just a clean weekend, it was the zenith of his career at this point, and I don't just mean in taking the crown. It was the sheer dominance. The absolute 0.4 of a second destruction of the opposition in qualifying is not supposed to happen in British touring cars anymore. He was on a level that I cannot recall in the NGTC era. And it was the same on Sunday. Wham, bam, race 1, a walkover. Race 2, some challenges, but nevertheless, mental fortitude held, and that race essentially won the title. Race 3, a tough test in the pack among his championship peers. Open to a shove that could benefit Hill or Sutton, but he held it all together to take the line in 5th, just behind Sutton, to take his first BTCC title. As for the rest of the Excelr8 team, 2022 provided challenges. Tom Chilton made a return to front-wheel drive after his BMW 4E in 2021. The results were not what he would have wanted, but they were an improvement on his sister year, and is still far from his BTCC return in the focus though. Consistent, around the top 10 for most of the season, there wasn't a standout or breakout weekend, but he committed early to a second season with the team for 2023. A few years of the commercial maelstrom of BTCC seat hopping has been stemmed, and better things should come next season. The 96 car of Jack Butzel didn't set the field afire. Unfortunately for the Channel Islander, he couldn't unlock any of the secrets of the i30 fastback. He couldn't match his 2021 season that was curtailed early with concussion. When he did make a step up in topping Jack Sears category at Thruxton, it was a joyous sight and relief. The car certainly has it. In a one-off appearance at Croft, James Cornell was well on the pace and managed to 14th place in that first run. One of the moments of the year, visually, was that Oulton Park crash and the eye-watering repair build for Dan Lloyd. Over 100 grand to get the car back on track, and it turned the season around. The weird thing about touring cars in the modern age is the need to bring a budget. Lloyd is one of those quality drivers who has to fight for every penny. It shouldn't be the case, but that's where it stands. He had a solid start of the year, 11 consecutive points finishes, 20 actually if you include the back end of 2021, and it all came to a shuddering halt when he got tied up with Ricky Collard and spun into the path of Turkington and Michael Crees. The car was almost a write-off, and it looked like there might not be enough in the kitty to finish the year. Thankfully, towards the end of the season, that was sorted, and the response was epic. Croft, starting third, flooring it from the start, becoming possessed and taking the lead on lap 1, an emotional victory against the odds, repeated in race 2. Then a rough patch followed over the next few rounds. What had been a solid 8th in the championship slipped to 10th, but the year finished in style with a classy win on the Brands GP circuit, which you might not have noticed while his teammate Ingram took the crown. Not bad for someone who's still right foot brakes. The challenges, the dream team, the squad of two halves, the best looking car on the grid, eventually the team's championship winners. What a start to the year at Motorbase. Flames pouring out of the damn Camish car at Donington qualifying was one of the more worrying moments of the season, and it set a tone for the first half of 2022, in fact right until summer break. The 4-car squad, running 2 cars under the Napa banner for Camish and 3-time champ Ash Sutton, and a pair of APEC racing examples for Ollie Jackson and Sam Osborne grabbed all of the pre-season headlines. But by the time the mid-season break arrived, some top-draw drives had not delivered a single win. The team was one of the first to have it all together, line-up sorted, colours ready, and testing, before some teams had even put pen to paper with the pilots. Both Camish and Sutton collected points better than a fervent Pokemon fan chasing cards 25 years ago, and the pair drove out of the skin. It raised a question. Was Ash Sutton not the all-round driver that people thought he was? Had the extended break from touring cars and a season in the Carrera Cup hindered Camish? Would neither driver be able to transition back to the front wheel? The answer to that was a statement. Don't be daft. The Snetterton tyre test during the holiday period in bloody hot weather gave the team time to sort through a couple of ideas that were impractical to try out on a race weekend, and it paid off. When the kick-off came back to Knockhill, Sutton was on the pace. A pair of physical encounters with Jake Hill resulted in a second, then that first win. Yes, Sutton still had those front-wheel skills. We never doubted it though. Next time out at Snetton, a couple of 9th places were topped with a reverse grid win. Sutton was in contention again. But was it him or the car? It was both. 2022 could have ended with both Napa drivers on 2 wins. Camish truly was on fire, metaphorically, not physically this time, for the second visit at Thruxton. Pole in qualifying, fastest lap and a win in race 1. Could have been a win in race 2, but The hangover from that round one fire at Donington and the first visit to Thruxton, where being nerfed off in race 1 had kept him from scoring as many points as his teammate, and it meant, realistically, he was out of the title hunt. But with a little help, Sutton could remain part of the battle, so Cam surrendered a race too late to his teammate. In the space of 3 rounds, the Napa side of the garage had dispelled all notions of a driven wheel handicap with 4 wins that they'd accumulated for the year. Sutton kept hauling the points over the next few weeks and arrived at Brands with a 5-point lead over Hill. Neither could compete with Ingram, and Ash finished the year in 2nd place. The rumours in the off-season have been that the squad had looked at moving from the Fours. And in the fallout with the championship decider, Autosport magazine's Marcus Simmons reported that the team were preparing for a newer rear-driven machine for 2023. On the other side of the Motorbase Focus setup, it wasn't such a merry year. The 2 race wins that Ollie Jackson took just a couple of years ago in the current iteration of the Ford seem to be a long time gone. Although there's been considerable developments in that time, it seems that others have stretched their legs a little further. At the head of the field, the Napa machine seemed to have lost some pace compared to their rivals, and the Apex duo seemed to be in the same situation in the midfield. Osborne seemed to be quiet this season, if you watch on the TV coverage, but at the circuit, in and around his peers, he was not afraid to put one up the inside, but it was a disappointing season. After 2 years, where the second half of the campaign looked like he was getting to grips with things, this year with a single 15th place for a point will have been a good push. For Jackson it was similar in the sense that the competitiveness had slipped. 12th with 2 wins in 2020, 14 finishes in the points in 2021 with a total of 77 points by the end of the season, compared with mere 33 points this year. You can't call all of it a driver drop-off if both have taken a dive in a similar vein. The talk about Motorbase dropping the Focus does make you wonder, would it be 2 cars or 4 cars? Is the Focus too out of date? Which, judging by the Napa results, it isn't. And after only 3 seasons, is it going to be signed off? And if it is, then surely we buy is ready. The West Surrey racing team with the BMW 330, known as the EM Sport, to defer to the hybrid tag, didn't get the driver's crown that draws the eyeballs that they wanted, but the Manufacturers and Constructors Championship went their way. All cylinders fired at some point, and all 3 drivers, the 2 BMW entrants of Colin Turkington and Stephen Jelly, and the MB offshoot of Jake Hill, they all took wins. In my season preview, I said 2 things. First, that if Hill and Turkington didn't go to the final day of the season in contention, it would be a failure. They both managed that, although in realistic terms Turkington was out of it at that point, just not mathematically. I also stated that Jelly winning a single reverse grid race wouldn't be enough. That's exactly what he did, and the truth is, I was wrong there. No, there wasn't a charge from the championship from the former single seat racer, and I don't think anybody expected that. I imagine he himself will have wanted more, but away from that Luton win there was some impressive driving, and following that win a decent run through Croft, Knockhill and Snetterton. There was no disgrace in his placement overall, and when you split the grid and line up on one side the drivers labelled as being workmanlike in their driving life versus work life, he did come out on top. It was a little better of a season than 2021, and he proved his usefulness to the team once again. Over in the 2 corners knocking about for the crown, it was a bit different. Colin Turkington ran a season of 2 halves with 2 cars, and Jake Hill reversed Ash Sutton by showing you can go from front to rear wheel drive and maintain success. That wasn't shouted about enough through the year. After a 2018 season that went a bit pear-shaped, shall we say, Hill came back with aplomb in the Audi S3 run by Trade Price. Everybody knew the talent was there, and he proved it with the only win that anybody ever achieved in the Old War Horse. You could argue there were 2, we won't get into Oulton Park today. The MB backing over the last couple of seasons have allowed him to run in some competitive machinery, but it's only this year that he's getting into a vehicle that could offer him the chance to take top spot at the end of the year. While most of the BTCC world was wondering if Ash Sutton could compete with the driven wheels ahead of him, nobody had the same conversation about Hill having his first full season with the power travelling through the rear. Yes, he has significant experience of racing that configuration historic machines, some are not really that old, but it doesn't compare to the cut and thrust and sharp end of a professional series where being on it is the default setting for all those around you all the time. It was a different Jake Hill in 2022. He knew the chance was there, and he was both honed and focused. There was a step up in intensity. In fact, I'd say in those areas he was ahead of the rest of the field. You see, when cars are pushed onto pit lane before heading to the grid, most of the drivers usually tend to wander out, put their earplugs in, take stock of the atmosphere, engage in some chat with mechanics or people on the pit lane, and get ready, get into the car, go to the grid. Hill didn't do that. On most occasions, he climbed straight into the car. No extraneous distractions were wanted to interfere with being in the zone. Crikey, even at Thruxton I spotted him getting into the car in the awning and steering it himself through the garage and onto the apron. I did not see any other driver do that. As for the racing, he was upper level. There's a plus and minus to every story. That first race of the year, contact with teammate Turkin from the off, damage that led to an exclusion. You could argue that the lost points bit him at the end of the season, but in that moment he showed Turkin that he wasn't going to roll over, and in a way it was good for him to get that out of the way at the start of the year. For both drivers, the advice to not do it again from Dick Bennett was probably best buried before the season really got underway. The result of it, though, was a determined drive into the top 10 for race 2, into race win in race 3, one that really settled on the line in the sand. 3 wins and 9 second places all told. The car crossed the line in every race. 28 out of 30, including the exclusion, were in the points. There's lots of moments of zoned in sensibility and some demon drives. The battles with Ash Sutton, where the pair took a win in a second each in the openers, displayed the controlled aggression that Hill is now known for. In chats with the other drivers in the field, he's respected for fair racing. The championship decided it didn't go his way, but it was impressive nevertheless for a first time in the shootout. Composure on track was there through all 3 races. He dropped down the order in the final race when taking a chance would be expected, but there was no caving to pressure with any stupid moves. He is now a legit frontrunner. Talking about frontrunners, it's not a BTCC season without the BMW of Colin Turkington being in with a shout. This season was one almost of 2 halves for the 4-time champ. Like Motorbase, WSR were on the ball early. Pre-season testing with all the kit up and running. The squad did have a few niggles with the hybrid, and would appear to have grasped the installation better than some on the grid. But that didn't stop the thing going haywire as the season closed out. Even with the preparation you expect from a work-supported BMW outfit, they didn't have a clean run through the season. The year started fresh for Turkington with a new chassis, 330, number 6. 4 and 5 of the sister cars, 2 and 3 are on the WSR roster, but chassis number 1 had been retired. The car that he took to the title in 2019 and campaigned for the last 2 years was sold into a private collection, with the stats of being the single most successful NGTC chassis in history as far as a wins to start with this show goes. As noted earlier, the new machine went into combat immediately when the season kicked off. A hard battle with teammate Hill at Donington resulted with a second. Brands ended with a win. Thruxton gave back a podium, as did Oulton, before being caught up in the Dan Lloyd accident. He was a bit more than winded in that one. It wasn't just back to normal the next year. It was a bit of soreness, let's say. As for the new motor, well, that was sidelined, and the owner of old number 1 allowed the car to be upgraded to the hybrid setup to see the year out. 2 weeks later, pole position and 2 podiums. Another 2 trips to the rostrum at Knockhill followed, then 2 wins at Snedden. The drive for 5 was back on its end. Thruxton gave 2 10th places and reverse grid second. Not a brilliant weekend, but Silverstone put the dream to one side. Being punted out at Luffield at the start of race 1 effectively ended his charge. Through no fault of his own, he was dumped onto the grass and spent the rest of the weekend playing catch-up for only 7 points. Although he went down to Kent mathematically in a position to be in with a shout, it wasn't going to be. He needed Ingram, Hill and Sutton to take each other out in race 1 and 2 to be able to have a go, but it wasn't to be. The chassis number 1 re-retired, still with that record. Could it be repaired, number 6, or even a new number 7, and another year at WSR for him?
For those of you who don't know, Motor Racing UK is a magazine. It's been running for almost 4 years now, and yes, it's printed on paper or available digitally. Most of the content in there is to do with British Touring Car Championship, TCR UK, TOCA, and a bit of club racing. It's available print, digital, subscription, individual issues. Concentrate on long form journalism, getting really deep into the nitty-gritty things, driver interviews, all kinds of interesting features. If that's your kind of thing, then Yeah, there. You can subscribe, or you can buy individual issues there. We're most appreciative of that. Thank you very much.
With that advert out the way, you're expecting me to continue the review and championship order, aren't you? But alas, no. With the main contenders out the way, we'll have a quick run through of the rest of the grid. And for that, we'll start with Team Hard, the Jack Sears champion, Bobby Thompson. I predicted that he'd be in the mix for that trophy before the season got underway, and I think it was just an outstanding season for him. Now, the Cooper's been a bit of a struggle, if we're honest. And before the year kicked off, I commented that I thought the team would have benefited from an extra season of running the car with ballast before the hybrids came online. They did have the struggles, but early on, they seemed to have a decent handle on things. Thompson hit the ground running at Donington. In fact, the whole team did. 3 points finishes for both him and Aaron Taylor Smith. It boded well. And a comeback drive for Thompson's second time out at Branks to grab his first overall podium. It was about as good as it got for the squad overall. Bobby battled through the year and was a regular visit to the points being positions. That consistency paid back, and it paid back the dividends with the Jack Sears trophy itself. Although main rival George Campbell won a race overall, he didn't pick up enough points to challenge Thompson for that bit of silverware. It was a finesse season for Bobby, and you have to think that it is his moment to be able to step up the order a little on the back of that superb season. For the other Team Hard drivers, it wasn't quite as happy a season. There were high hopes for Taylor Smith. With a contract in place, he really believes the car will come into its own next season, with 2 years of development behind it. After a fairly solid round one, it just never gelled. There were occasions where the speed came. It was a really solid outing at Silverstone, but through most of the year, there were wrong avenues for setup, which never really unlocked anything, and kept the Irishman in the pack fighting. And once you're in there, without a car advantage, all the skill you have is being forced into an unwinnable battle. For Nick Hamilton, he still impresses, but he doesn't seem to have connected with the Cooper as well as he did with the WCC and the Ford Focus before that. Only one finish in the top 20 this season. Jack Buff had an agreement to run the fourth hard car this year, but it fell through at the last minute. The team could have done with him carrying over his work from 2021, but the current financial situation didn't lend that. Will Powell drove the majority of the season in a car that he never really got to grips with. Carl Baldley had one out, and to the surprise of many, and the surprise of the year, was Tom Oliphant turning out at Thruxton. Now, you did have to wonder whether it was a one-off due to his move to Australia, or was it he came back to keep his foot in with a look and come back in 2023, with the latest news being that he'll be in a supercar supporting series down under next year. On the other side of the hard premises are the three infinities, fall from grace perhaps. It's easy enough to say that the success in 2020 and 21 was all down to Ash Sutton, but that would be disingenuous. Aidan Moffat went from his best championship position to his second worst. Sutton would not have been a contender in this car this year. Many people assume that in the BTCC you build a car, tweak it here and there, and race it for a couple of years. This is the perfect machine to show that is far from the truth. As a quick catch-up, considered the first Q50s arrived in the GTR era. When Laser Tools brought one back to life in 2019, it was substantially re-engineered into RML specifications, and for 2020, new cars were built, and year-on-year components that aren't from the RML side of things were evaluated and improved. The 2022 car was changed significantly from the one that won the title in the last 2 years. Not all the cars on the grid were in the position to just whack on the hybrid. Some needed more work than others to compensate. And from the feedback that was shared with me, it was significant. In hindsight, maybe a few steps were taken in the wrong direction. Also, this is one setup that really did suffer from hybrid problems. For Aidan Moffat, the last 2 seasons looked like he was climbing up the ladder in the order of things. Remember, he's only 26 still. But he's had his education in the series. It was a 9th full season, and the last 2 years have been rather good. For 2022, there seemed to be a confidence built upon the level at which he's been racing of late. But a difficult pre-season put the team on the back foot. There was never a chance to stop, take stock and reset. Scoring only a single podium must have been a hard hit though, with many frustrations of being caught up, and out of that, what was initially assumed to be a car racing out of position. But as the season wore on, it simply couldn't be salvaged. Next to Patson hopped into the ex-Sutton machine. For an 18-year-old with a single-seat background, He was a Sauber Formula 1 junior for a while. Getting a rear-wheel drive position was probably the best thing for him. There were only 2 points position in this debut season, but he wasn't that far from his team leader in what was a learning year. And being frank, this is one of the few championships where the youth is a negative. It's still dominated by approved drivers who've had their foot under the table for a while. His talent was on show often. The car control and composure was there too, and he wasn't bullied into submission. There were a few occasions where he finished the race minus a wing or something. He learned quickly to give as good as he got and is now blooded. If he chooses to remain in touring cars, then he really is one for the future to keep an eye on. Away from the Laser Tools part of the team, Rick Barfoot raced the third Q50. Look, people think Rick is just having a bit of fun, running around the back, enjoying the fans and the rock and race thing. Not true. I've seen him climb out of a car after being balked by a leading driver when he was on a fast lap in qualifying, and he was smokestack fuming about it. I've seen him dejected from yet another punt. I've seen him elated after a good battle. It wasn't just a laugh, and to be fair, he put in 110% and was often the victim of others throwing weight around. He'll be a loss for the fans in 2023. Hybrids began on a rear-wheel drive machine, Sicily BMWs. Emanating from the team at one point was a quote: "The hybrid is great for all the engine parts it's not connected to, that are just get destroyed." It was never a case of buying their way at the top for the Northwest-based team. They might have acquired cars as new builds from WSR at the beginning of 2021, but this is the BTCC, and a shortcut to the top does not exist. Last term, Adam Morgan proved his versatility once again by getting the rear-wheel drive machine he drove to the top of the podium twice before a torrid end-of-season run-in. Then teammate Tom Chilton didn't gel and was one and done with his experiment away from front-wheel drive. For 2022, Porsche racer George Gamble filled the seat. To be honest, it was one of those, whoa, where did that left-field shot come from? But for Gamble, coming to the championship, there was a sensible caveat. It suited both him and the team, and that was his experiences of running those Porsches in the GB Cup. He was well set for a car that pushes rather than pulls. Pre-season, it was a mixed bag. There were a number of decent laps and there were a number of hybrid-related struggles. In our pre-season preview, we predicted that Morgan should have a better year than 2021 and that Gamble would likely battle Bobby Thompson for the Jack Sears trophy and could grab a win. You know, it's nice to be right about things sometimes. Okay, Morgan only took one win this season, but the consistency and front-running ability, where the car wasn't hampered by tech problems from the hybrid, had him in the hunt at most of the tracks. The driving skills on show in every aspect displayed that it's all there. And a second in the Independence Trophy, both driver and team showed that the team was running on all guns with the BMW. To many, Gamble was a shock, not to us obviously, and all that crap about Sicily only being able to run one car was put in the bag. His performance, well, it wasn't as consistent as the de facto team leader, but first time out at Donington, there it was, a podium. In race 2, not a reverse grid thing. It was a marker of the ability that is there. Of course, this isn't the Carrera Cup. The intensity level's higher on a race weekend and in between events. There were meetings where it simply didn't fire, which is to be expected in the first season, but at Knockhill, an attacking third race gave that debut win. It certainly sets Gamble up as an interesting prospect going forward. For the Speedworks Toyota team, it was a slightly odd year. Rory Butcher claimed 5th in the Drivers' Championship, but it was a quiet rise, with the position being taken right at the end of the season, as a jump in competitiveness for the last 2 rounds, tied in with Josh Cook seeing the season crumble, well, it put him in a final position that looked like it could not be achieved with half the season gone. New teammate Ricky Collard flashed his ability at times, but his end-of-season decision to retire and shift his focus in life did leave a thought of at what point in the year did that decision come, as the back end of the campaign in retrospect looked like it was a case of running his time out. For Butcher, the stability of going into year 2 with the same team was a bonus. As we've seen over the last few years, there's a hell of a lot of talent there, and from trackside, even if the results aren't always there, we've got a qualifier who's committed on every corner of every lap. But this year, compared to last, it seemed like it just wasn't happening in the same way. But look at it this way: 29 consecutive points finishes from the 2nd to the 30th race of the year. 25 finishes in the top 10. In 2021, there were 3 wins, and in 2022 only 1, but he kept his name in the hat all the way through the year. Heading to Silverstone with 2 rounds left, there'd been 4 third places. In the last 2 rounds it went like this: Silverstone, pole, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Rance GP, 2nd, 4th, 3rd. The one worry in all of this is the car though. This season, that Silverstone pole and win mirrored the total domination from pole and 2 wins in 2021. In the 2 years previous, Tom Ingram had good runs at Silverstone. He had a 2nd in the first race in 2020, 2 wins in 2019. Is it a car that's just better there than anywhere else? Ricky Collard just seems like he was cursed from the get-go. A statement from the team gave a reason of food poisoning for missing the Croft pre-season test. There were 2 cars there, and the whole world knew he'd been running before with that squad. But he was finally announced in time for the cars hitting track for media day. Retirements at Donington, including on the start line, very low down the order in rounds 2 and 3. It had things looking bleak. 3 top 10s at Oulton and another tech disaster at Croft. You wouldn't have blamed him for deciding then that the game was up. The second half of the year was either around the top 10 or retired. His decision to move down under was announced straight after the season ended, and we wish him well. The Honda FK8 Type R has just not quite matched the FK2 that had superseded, and the surprising thing to me is that dynamics have now been running this shape since the beginning of 2018, 5 seasons. It still feels oddly new. One thing the car certainly hasn't managed to do is replicate its predecessor, and it must be frustrating. 2022 started hot at Donington for Gordon Shedden, a 3rd place and a win. It was his best weekend of the season results-wise, with a pick-up in form at the end of 2021, remember, after his WTCR adventure the 3-time champ was on a comeback trail. But at Donington it was a stop and look moment. Is the deal here? Was the flash of old building on those foundations to bring back the glory days? Alas no. But it wasn't as if it was a case of it was all downhill after that. There was another win, there were other podiums, some Shedden trademark battles and moves, plenty of points, but it just seemed a little flat at points, as it did for teammate Dan Rowbottom. Only 1 podium in 2022 for him, no repeat win, a drop down the order on points and positions. Is that down to the absolute hassle that the team had with their hybrid this season, because they were one of the teams to be hit hard again and again compared to some of their rivals? It was just a disappointing season for the whole team, when there was so much hope of an improvement on 2021. The thing is that Robo was kind of a marker point. He had shown over the 2 seasons that you can come from obscurity and be on point with the front runners, and frankly, the results this year didn't match what they should have been. But it doesn't mean that Robo was a one-season wonder. Despite the results not being what he wanted, he seemed to be more settled into the role of being in the front-running team. There were points last season where body language on pit lane kind of screamed imposter syndrome, but this year he looked the part on and off track. Hopefully that'll continue. As for the team, one of the Toka Grande outfits, a long winter to get the hybrid system right. Seems like, well, that's the prescription that's needed. Well, you can wonder if other cars are hitting their max or not. It has to be said that Power Max, Vauxhall Extras seem to be maxed out. They are the oldest cars on the grid. The squad are not rocking on their heels at all though. There is no excuse for them to not go out and put 100% in, which they do session after session. There were murmurs that the car would be retired ahead of 2023, but that was also the case this time last year. There were difficulties with hybrid and some areas of rabbit hole setup, but they soldiered on, and both drivers put in the full beans there. 19th and 20th in the championship sounds a hard hit, but consider this. Between the drivers, they put the team in the points at every round apart from Silverstone. Now to finish in them positions with that kind of performance, it just shows you how hard fought of a championship the British touring cars are. Michael Crees, an ultimate fan favourite, it was good to see him back in the fold of the series. BTCC needs drivers who interact so well with the audience. Without wanting to sound mushy, he does make so many fans go home happy and feeling special because of the way he enthusiastically embraces them, which could give the image of being in there just for the fun and crack, but no, that's not the whole truth. You don't step up to touring cars like he did in 2019 just for a laugh and still be higging now. There were a series of calamitous races through the middle of the year, not necessarily his fault, but even with 3 races less, equaling his points total from 2020 when he raced the BTC Civic was some feat. The 2 Thruxton meetings in particular must have been rewarding, with 6 points returns from the 6 races. Ashhand, like George Gamble, a surprise landing from left field. There was a strong belief that Jack Constable, who made an appearance with the team in 2020, has been involved in development work and is driven for Power Max and TCR UK, had the deal nailed. but a last-minute change of situation meant that Hand could get in there, and he proved himself handy. With a few years out of the top-level seat, after racing a long-run Clios and claiming the 2019 British GT4 crown, there was a perception that he'd struggled to adapt, like many GT converts have over the last couple of seasons. He didn't. He outscored Grace by 5 points in a championship place, which must have been satisfying, especially that fifth that he scored at Thruxton. His 2022 performance is something that will have been noticed by teams up the grid. It'll be interesting to see where he lands for 2023 if he chooses to remain in the championship. Now last but not least, there was BTC Racing. 3 separate stories. The continuing tale of a pioneer, a retiring legend, and a shoo-in championship contender watching his title challenge collapse. The year didn't start well for the returning Josh Cook and newly arrived Jason Plato when some little scrotum whipped their wallets from the team transporter at the Croft Test. But once the season got underway, it seemed like one of the drivers was on fire. Cook continued as the unofficial leader of the team, and after 3 rounds, looked like he had the title under his belt, but results, and what was under the bonnet of the BTC version of the Civic Type R, didn't reflect the whole reality of things. It was more a case of him being there in spite of problems. The driving was sublime. Points in the podium at Donington, 2 wins at Brands, 2 wins during the first Thruxton visit. Looking like a dominant force, then a slow slide down the order. Engine power, straight line speed, both the topics that repeatedly came to the surface through the year. What one team did mention at a point in the season was installation problems. From what they said, it seemed that 3 different engines in 3 years, plus the addition of hybrid this time out, had caught them out a little bit. The Torque Swindon engine last year didn't need too much of a fetment to slot in, and it ran perfectly with cooling and the like, but the Torque M Sport with hybrid didn't quite do that, and it cost a bit of power. When asked about the dominance at those 2 tracks early in the season, what came back was Brands was cool and wet, so that was the driver. And the engine problems weren't exposed there. Thruxton was fast, and if you get momentum, it works. And there's actually less stress from the hybrid. Some of it kind of correlates. The second Thruxton visit delivered another win, although the record showed as a race 3 victory. Getting all elbows out with something at the beginning of race 1 stop what could have been a more points-driven weekend, and towards the back end of the year, when the weather cooled, the performance of the car seemed to come back a little after the hot summer. Whichever way you look at it, Cook outperformed the car. And because of his driving, he was in the mix when he probably shouldn't have been in with a shout. For Jade Edwards, it was year 2 with BTC. The simple truth is, she doesn't have the pace of Cook or the experience of Plato, as many drivers in the field don't, and she didn't embarrass herself. Back of the field battles and an almost exact repeat of 2021 might not be what she wanted, but the racecraft improved. There were scrapes, of course, but all it needed was that one weekend where qualifying comes good and a race away from the savagery of running a few places below the points would allow for a high place finish, and it just didn't work out that way. The ingredients are all there though. As for JP, Jason Plato, we had to leave the legend to last. It wasn't the year he would have wanted. Those few wins away from the Magic 100 were only on the cards once with his final podium at Stettin, but you know what? He was like he was reborn from the moment he announced his farewell jaunt, in and out of the car. He could still offer something on the day, but across the season, competing with the new blood when you're in your 50s every other weekend, it's a hard task, especially at this level. There's only been 1 win in the last 5 years, which does include a year out. The sad truth is, it's time to say goodbye to JP the driver. There will be things missed. The adorning of the flat cap that's become de rigueur over the last few seasons, cheeky smiles matched with inflammatory comments, an off the record, unprintable story, a sly cigarette in the garage, hidden from any kids asking for an autograph. It's one of those moments where it does truly signal the end of an era. It is fitting when you look at the exiting of Plato and remember that Tom Ingram is a protege with the Plato-led KX Academy programme. It kind of rounds things off nicely. Both exude personality, both have managed to pull a rabbit from a proverbial hat in terms of race winning titles. With the BTCC at the level it is now, it's hard to envisage Ingram going for 100 wins or topping 97 wins of the Master. But you'd have good odds on the apprentice adding more title to his haul and topping the 2 that Plato retires with. All that's left to say is congratulations to 2022
British Touring Car Champion, Tom Ingram.
Celebration, which is lovely on the